There was one night that completely changed the way I understood life, death, and everything in between. Until that moment, I believed there had to be some kind of mistake. No matter what anyone told us, I refused to accept that our child was gone. She was lying right in front of us. Her face looked peaceful, as if she were only sleeping. Her skin still seemed warm, and every time I stared at her long enough, I convinced myself that I could still see her chest rising ever so slightly. As a parent, hope can be stronger than reality. No matter how impossible the situation looked, I clung to the belief that she would open her eyes, smile at us, and everything would return to normal. The elderly spiritual guide we had come to see watched us in silence. He didn't argue or try to convince us with words. Instead, he quietly began preparing something that felt more like a sacred ritual than an ordinary ceremony. Fresh flowers were carefully arranged around our daughter's body. Every movement was slow and deliberate, as though each flower carried a meaning beyond our understanding. Then we were handed a small bottle filled with fragrant oil and instructed to gently apply it to our eyelids. We didn't question why. When your world is falling apart, you'll follow any instruction if it offers even the smallest chance of hope. Moments later, the guide placed his thumbs lightly over our closed eyes while softly whispering prayers that were too quiet for us to understand. The atmosphere inside the room changed almost instantly. The air became noticeably colder. The silence grew so heavy that even our own breathing sounded unnaturally loud. Then, something happened that shattered every belief I had ever held. Our daughter's body trembled. Very slowly, her eyes opened. She stared straight ahead without blinking. At first, my heart leaped with hope. Maybe this was a miracle. Maybe she was coming back. Maybe we had been wrong all along. Without thinking, we rushed toward her. But the moment we reached out, our hands passed through empty space. We could see her perfectly. She was only inches away from us. Yet, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't touch her. It felt as though an invisible wall separated our worlds. We reached for her again. And again. Each attempt ended the same way. She remained just beyond our grasp. That's when the truth finally began to sink in. The little girl standing before us wasn't our daughter as we had known her. It was her spirit. The realization crushed us. It felt as if we were losing her all over again. The first time was when death took her away. The second was when we realized that the child standing before us no longer belonged to the world of the living. Tears came without warning. No parent should ever experience the pain of seeing their child standing only a few feet away, knowing they can never embrace them again. As we struggled to accept the impossible, another terrifying revelation emerged. Our daughter had not been alone. According to the spiritual guide, she had been accompanied by another unseen presence, an entity that had lingered around the house we once lived in. Surprisingly, this spirit had never intended to harm us. Instead, it seemed strangely attached to our daughter, almost as though they had become companions long before we noticed anything unusual. But the most horrifying truth was still waiting. The guide explained that what had happened to our child was not simply an accident. Someone had deliberately caused it. According to what he had witnessed during the ritual, our daughter had been used as part of a dark spiritual practice. She had become an innocent sacrifice in someone else's desperate pursuit of power and personal desire. For a moment, grief gave way to anger. It was impossible to imagine that anyone could sacrifice the life of a child for their own selfish ambitions. Before we could process everything we had just learned, our daughter's figure began to fade. At first, it was barely noticeable. Then, her outline became translucent, slowly, like morning mist, dissolving beneath the rising sun. She disappeared before our eyes. Within seconds, she was gone. The room fell silent once again. Only the scent of fresh flowers remained, lingering in the cold air around us. Just before we left, the guide offered one final explanation. He told us that our daughter's spirit had not crossed over completely. She refused to leave her family behind. As long as her heart remained tied to us, she would always find her way home. At the time, we believed the nightmare had reached its end. We couldn't have been more wrong. That night wasn't the ending of our story. It was only the beginning. We left that place carrying a truth no parent should ever have to face. The drive home was silent. Neither of us spoke a single word. There was nothing left to say. Our minds replayed the impossible scene over and over again. The moment our daughter's spirit had stood before us, close enough to see, yet forever beyond our reach. Every memory felt like a blade twisting deeper into our hearts. When we finally arrived home, we expected nothing but emptiness. Instead, she was waiting for us. Our daughter sat quietly in the living room, just as she always had before everything changed. She looked peaceful. She smiled the same innocent smile we remembered. For a brief moment, we forgot everything we had witnessed earlier that night. We rushed toward her without thinking. This time, we could hold her. Our arms wrapped around her tiny body. She felt real, warm, solid. If we hadn't experienced what happened only hours before, we would have believed she had never died at all. But deep inside, we already knew the truth. The child we embraced was no longer living in the same world we were. That night, sleep never came. We stayed awake until sunrise, watching her play alone in the living room. Sometimes she laughed softly. Other times, she appeared to be listening to someone standing just beyond our sight. More than once, her eyes followed movements across an empty corner of the room. Each time, she smiled at something invisible. A chill crept through our bodies. By morning, our grief had transformed into something else. Anger. Someone had taken our child away from us. Someone had done this deliberately. We couldn't accept that they would simply disappear without facing the consequences. With that single purpose driving us forward, we began searching for the person we believed was responsible. After hours of traveling, we finally reached the house where they had once lived. But the people living there were strangers. The previous owners had vanished shortly after moving away. No forwarding address, no explanation, no trace. It was as though they had disappeared from the world entirely. Although disappointed, we weren't ready to give up. There was still one place we needed to visit. The old rental house. The place where our nightmare had begun. The moment we stepped out of the car, an overwhelming sense of dread settled over us. Time had not been kind to the house. The yard had been swallowed by tall weeds. Paint peeled from the walls in long, faded strips. Broken windows reflected the gray afternoon sky like empty eyes staring back at us. Even before entering, something about the place felt wrong. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt watchful, as if the house itself remembered everything that had happened inside. The front door stood slightly open. No wind moved it. No sound came from within. Yet, neither of us could shake the feeling that someone was already inside, quietly waiting. We stepped through the doorway. Every floorboard groaned beneath our weight. Dust floated through the stale air. The smell of mold and decaying wood filled every room. Our footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Each sound seemed louder than it should have been. Eventually, we reached the bedroom, the very room where our lives had changed forever. Taking one deep breath, we pushed the door open. Inside, everything stood frozen in time. There, on the dusty floor, lay our daughter's tiny clothes. Beside them rested her favorite stuffed toy. No one had touched them. It was as if the room had been abandoned the very moment tragedy struck. I picked up the toy with trembling hands. Dust scattered into the air. For a second, I could almost hear her laughter echoing through the room. Then, the silence returned. We searched every corner of the house. No evidence that anyone had entered for years. Yet the feeling of being watched never faded. Several times, I thought I heard tiny footsteps running down the hallway. When I turned around, nothing. A door creaked open somewhere deeper inside the house. We followed the sound. Again, nothing. Moments later, something heavy crashed in another room. We rushed toward it. Still nothing. The house seemed alive. Not with people, but with memories that refused to die. The longer we remained there, the stronger the pressure became. Every instinct told us we didn't belong there anymore. Just before leaving, I glanced back one final time toward the bedroom. For only a heartbeat. I thought I saw the silhouette of a small child standing in the doorway. She wasn't moving. She wasn't smiling. She simply watched us. Then, with the blink of an eye, she disappeared. We never found the person we had been searching for. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Months quietly slipped into years. Every lead ended the same way. Nothing. The trail had gone cold forever. Eventually, we stopped searching. Not because we had forgiven them, but because we realized that no amount of revenge could bring our daughter back. Or so we believed. Every evening, when we came home, she was there, waiting, smiling, as if nothing had happened. That's when we realized the horrifying truth. We hadn't just lost our daughter. We were living with a child who didn't belong to this world. Life never returned to normal. To everyone else, we looked like an ordinary family. We smiled at neighbors, celebrated birthdays, and decorated the house every holiday. But behind our front door, we lived with a secret no one could believe. Our daughter never truly left. She still wandered through the house, played with her favorite toys, and smiled the same way she always had. The only difference was that time no longer touched her. As the years passed, our hair turned gray, and our younger child grew into an adult. Yet she remained exactly the same little girl we had lost. Then strange things became part of everyday life. Every night after midnight, children's laughter echoed from her room. Sometimes we heard whispers or tiny footsteps racing through the halls. Whenever we opened the door, the room was empty except for her toys. Soon, she began asking for fresh animal blood and bones. Whenever we refused, the house seemed to come alive. Lights flickered, doors slammed shut, dishes shattered, and heavy footsteps echoed through rooms where no one stood. But when her wishes were granted, the silence returned. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. Fear could never erase a parent's love. We kept telling ourselves we were protecting her, even as we wondered if we were feeding something far darker. Years later, visitors occasionally claimed they saw a little girl watching from the hallway. before vanishing into thin air. Others heard laughter change from a child's voice into something old and unnatural. That was when we finally accepted the truth. Our daughter was no longer alone. Something unseen had been living beside her, and beside us, all along. As we grew older, another feeling replaced our fear: guilt. Had our love kept her trapped between two worlds? Had we refused to let her find peace because we couldn't bear to say goodbye? In the end, we realized the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not holding on. It's finding the strength to let go. The years passed, but nothing inside our home ever truly changed. While the world moved on, our daughter remained the same little girl we had lost. She still wandered the halls with quiet footsteps, smiling as if time had never touched her. We grew older with every passing year, but she never aged a single day. My husband eventually believed that our love was keeping her trapped between two worlds. I wanted to believe he was wrong, yet every time I looked at her, I didn't see a ghost I saw my child. After he passed away, and our younger child started a family of his own, I was left alone in the old house. At least, that's what everyone believes. Each morning, I still heard tiny footsteps. Sometimes toys appeared where I hadn't left them, and soft laughter echoed through empty rooms. I was no longer afraid. Her presence had become a quiet part of my life. As I grew old, I finally understood that love isn't about holding on forever. It's about carrying someone in your heart, no matter where they are. One rainy evening, I heard gentle footsteps behind me. I closed my eyes, smiled through my tears, and felt a warmth beside me. For the first time in years, I was at peace. Now, I am no longer afraid of what will happen after this life. I want to believe that when my journey ends, my daughter will be waiting for me, not as a lost spirit, but finally free, smiling and reaching out her tiny hand. Because some bonds are stronger than death, and some love lasts forever.